$100,000. It clears tonight. You are on a plane by Sunday. And you never contact my son again.
Take it. It's more than women like you usually get.
Thank you. I'll put it to good use.
One more thing, Chairman. Your bank. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., be there in person. Someone bought your hotel this week. You should look them in the eye when they sign.
Why was she smiling instead of crying? Why did she take the check without asking a single question, without negotiating, without even reading it twice? How did a freelance interior designer know about a sale that even the business papers hadn't heard of yet? And why, at 9 the next morning, would the most powerful hotel family in Korea walk into a private bank in Seoul and find the woman they had just paid to disappear sitting at the head of the table? Because by 10 a.m., the check in her purse would be the smallest line item in a $300 million purchase. And the name on the deed of the Grand Ilsong Seoul, the crown of the Kwon family for 56 years, would be hers. This is her story. And it starts 70 years earlier in a guest house on the south side of Chicago that no longer exists. The guest house was called the Marigold, and it stood on a corner in Bronzeville, Chicago. From 1946 to 1971, Zora Bennett's great-grandmother Odette ran it. 12 rooms, clean sheets, hot breakfast, a piano in the parlor. In those years, a black family driving across America couldn't stop at just any hotel. Most doors were closed to them. Odette's door was not. Musicians stayed there. Pullman porters, preachers, nurses, ball players. Odette kept a leather guest ledger, and she made every guest sign it because, she said, a name written down is a person remembered. The Marigold was torn down before Zora was born. The ledger survived. Her grandmother Dolores kept it wrapped in cloth in a cedar drawer. And on Sunday afternoons she would open it and read the names to Zora like scripture. Your people ran a hotel when hotels wouldn't run for us, Dolores told her. Remember that the next time somebody treats you like you don't belong in a lobby. Zora remembered. At 19, she worked the night front desk of a hotel in the Chicago Loop to pay for school. She watched the overbookings, the paper systems, the housekeeping chaos, the small complaints that turned into big ones because nobody wrote anything down. At 24, she and her best friend Dominique Hayes started a software company in a borrowed office above a laundromat. They called it Stayline. It did one thing. It ran a small hotel's entire front desk. Bookings, rooms, housekeeping, pricing, in one clean system. It was not glamorous. It was not famous. It worked. 11 years later, Stayline ran the operations of 40,000 hotels in 19 countries. And when a European travel giant came to buy it, the price was $1.9 billion. Zora owned 38% of it. The terms were never made public. She had spent 11 years refusing interviews, refusing panels, refusing photographs. The trade press knew her as Zora Bennett. The regular press didn't know her at all. When the deal closed, she signed the papers, shook the hands, and walked out of an industry that had never once seen her face. There was exactly one photograph of her from those years, a blurry name tag at a Chicago tech meet. Remember that photograph? The money went into a quiet family office. She named it Odette Holdings. Dominique ran it. It bought small stakes in hotels and hospitality companies around the world, always through lawyers, always discreetly. And it never gave interviews either. And in the first year after the sale, Zora learned exactly what the number did to people. A man she had dated for 2 years proposed 3 weeks after her circle back home found out. She saw the message on his phone before she saw the ring. A text to his brother. Lock it down before she figures out she can do better. Old friends became pitches. New friends arrived pre-smiling. Then her grandmother Dolores died, holding her hand, and the last person on earth who had known Zora before the number was gone. So Zora made a rule, and she kept it like a vow. Nobody new gets the number. She traveled. She landed in Seoul for a 2-week design workshop and stayed 4 years. She rented a small studio apartment in Mangwon-dong, took freelance interior design work under her own name cafes, guest houses, one dentist office, and lived on what those jobs paid. The work was real. She was good at it. It was the life she would have had if Stayline had never existed, and she found that she loved it. She kept Odette's ledger on a shelf above her desk. And every Thursday afternoon, she took her sketchbook to the lobby of the Grand Ilsong Seoul. The Grand Ilsong was built in 1969. Marble floors, brass elevator doors, and a great clock above the front desk that had been wound by hand for over 50 years. It was the flagship of the Ilsong Hospitality Group and the crown of the Kwon family. And everyone in Korea knew both names. Zora didn't go there for the Kwons. She went for the lobby. It was the closest thing she had ever found to the photographs of the Marigold's parlor, a room built in a time when a lobby was supposed to make every guest feel like somebody. She sat in the same chair under the clock, and she drew. On the fourth Thursday, a cup of coffee appeared at her elbow. Under it, a napkin with a handwritten line. On the house. The management. She looked up. A man in a plain dark suit was pretending to inspect a flower arrangement. Mid-30s. No name badge. You're the management? She said. I'm a manager, he said. Of some things. The coffee, definitely. His name, he said, was Woo. He worked in operations. He had noticed that she drew the room and not the people, and he wanted to know why. The people leave, Zora said. The room stays. Rooms tell the truth. He sat down. He was easy to talk to. Direct, a little formal, curious about the right things. He asked what she saw in the lobby, and she told him. The worn path in the marble where 50 years of bellhops had walked the shortest line to the door. The clock nobody would ever dare replace. The chandelier that had been rewired badly twice. You can see all of that from this chair? You can see anything from a chair, she said. If you sit still long enough. He came back the next Thursday. And the one after that. Coffee, the napkin, the same line. On the house. The management. It became their private joke. 2 months in, over dinner in a small restaurant far from the hotel, he told her the truth, and he had trouble looking at her while he did it. His full name was Kwon Hyun-woo. His grandfather built the Grand Ilsong. His father, Kwon Dae-sung, was chairman of the group. He was the only son, and he had spent his whole life being the Kwon heir first and a person second. So when a woman in the lobby talked to him for 2 months like he was just a man who worked there, he hadn't wanted it to end. I'm sorry, he said. I wanted you to like me before you liked the name. Zora looked at him for a long moment. I understand that, she said. Better than you know. She told herself she would tell him her version of the same secret when the time was right. The time was never right. A year later, at 2 a.m. in the closed lobby, with old Mr. Ko the doorman winding the great clock, Hyun-woo got down on one knee under it and held up a coffee cup and a napkin. Forever, if you'll have me. The management. She said yes. She said yes to the man. What she didn't know yet was that the family came with the ring, or that they had already started putting a price on her. The first proof came a month after the engagement, at the family dinner in Seongbuk-dong. The Kwon residence sat behind a stone wall, with a gate that opened by itself, and a housekeeper who took Zora's coat without meeting her eyes. Chairman Kwon Dae-sung did not come to dinner. He arrived at 9, when the plates were being cleared, still on the phone, and passed the dining room without stopping. Zora had gone to find the washroom. That is how she happened to be standing in the corridor, unseen, when the chairman finished his call 10 feet away. He spoke in English because the man on the other end was a banker in Hong Kong. No, it's not serious, the chairman said. A decorator. American. My son is being sentimental. He needs to marry capital, not a girl with a sketchbook. A pause. It's a phase. Phases end. I'll end this one myself if the timing requires it. Another pause. And tell the consortium they'll have their answer by October. Zora stood very still. Then she walked back to the table and sat down. At that table, Madame Kwon Sung-hee, the chairman's sister, examined her like an auction lot and spoke about her in the third person. Does she work? I design interiors, Zora said. Small spaces mostly. How useful, Madame Kwon said. To her nephew, not to her. We redo the suites every decade. Perhaps she leave a card. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened. Aunt, she is sitting right there. I know exactly where she's sitting, his aunt said pleasantly and refilled her own glass. In the car, He apologized twice and said they would come around. Zora said, maybe. She had run a company for 11 years. She had sat across tables from people who priced everything they looked at. She knew a room that had already voted. That was the first proof. To this family, she was not a person. She was a problem with a deadline attached. And there was one thing she couldn't place yet. The consortium. October. A banker in Hong Kong, in the same breath as her name. What she didn't know yet was that the family's real emergency wasn't the girl in the lobby. It was carved into the marble she loved. The second proof. 2 weeks later, she went and verified herself. She noticed the man with the gray car on a Tuesday. Outside her studio in the morning. Outside a client's cafe that same afternoon. Nobody parks twice in one day in 2 neighborhoods by accident. She didn't tell Hyun-woo. She called Chicago. Dominique Hayes picked up on the second ring, the way she had for 20 years. Talk to me, Z. Someone's following me. I need to know who's paying him. It took Dominique's security people 4 days. A Seoul investigation agency had pulled Zora's visa records, her lease, and her one small bank account, the only account on earth with her name on it. The retainer traced back through a shell company used by the Ilsong Group's legal department. They're running due diligence on you, Dominique said. Like you're an acquisition. No, Zora said. Like I'm a liability. Say the word and this ends. 1 press release. 1 wire transfer. You could buy the ground their house sits on. Nobody new gets the number, Dom. They're not news, either your in-laws. Especially not people who are counting, Zora said and hung up. She still didn't tell Hyun-woo. If she told him, he would confront his father. If he confronted his father, they would dig harder. And if they dug hard enough, the digging might reach Chicago. What she didn't know yet was that the third proof would come to her by accident, in writing, and that it would have a date on it. The third proof arrived a month later, inside the hotel itself. Madame Kwon had hired her. That was its own small humiliation. My nephew insists you have taste, she'd said, naming a fee that was an insult with a decimal point. Refresh the peony banquet room. Even a phase should be useful. Zora took the job because the job put her on the working floors of the Grand Ilsong. And the working floors told the truth. A vendor calling twice in one morning about invoices 90 days late. Housekeeping running 4 people short on every shift. The chandelier repair deferred 3 quarters in a row. The hotel was beautiful at the front and bleeding at the back. Zora knew the signs. At Stayline, she had watched 1,000 hotels die inside their own data before anyone at the front desk felt it. Then on a Thursday, a young assistant with her arms full handed Zora a folder. From the chairman's office. The specifications you'll need. It was the wrong folder. Inside there were no fabrics. There was a memorandum. Kwon and Ju, the Ju family, the group's largest private creditor. A marriage, Kwon Hyun-woo and Ju Hae-rin. In exchange, a debt extension, a standstill, a joint expansion. There was a timeline page with October circled. And there was one line, typed like a task among tasks. Resolve the American matter before the announcement. Zora read it twice. Then she closed the folder and handed it back. This isn't for me, she said. You'll want to be more careful. The assistant went white and hurried away. And Zora stood alone in the peony room with fabric samples in her hand and her own name reduced to a matter. The first proof was a phone call. The second was a private investigator. The third was a document with a deadline. 3 times now, this family had told her exactly what she was to them. A line item to be resolved before October. That night, she took a debts ledger down from the shelf and sat with it open on her knees for a long time. She could end it in 1 phone call. She knew that. 1 call to Dominique, 1 press release. And the family that called her a decorator would spend the rest of their lives apologizing to the money. That was exactly why she couldn't do it. If I show them the number, she told Dominique on the phone, I will never know what I was worth at 0. And neither will he. So what's the plan? Their deadline is October. Fine. That's my deadline too. If Hyun-woo chooses me at 0, they never need to know. If he doesn't, she didn't finish the sentence. Dominique was quiet for a moment. One thing you should hear then. The Ilsong's debt paper is moving. Quiet channels. If the Ju deal dies, that flagship hotel comes to market by winter. And Odette will get the call. We always get the call. What do I say when it comes? Say we're not interested. A pause. For now, Zora said. What she didn't know yet was how soon that call would come, or what this family would do to her in the week before it did. The summer became a rhythm. Humiliation. Breath. Humiliation. Breath. In June, the chairman summoned her to his office for the first and only private conversation they would have before the night of the check. It lasted 12 minutes. He did not offer her tea. You seem like a practical woman, Kwon Dae-sung said. So I'll be practical. My son has obligations you cannot share and you cannot survive. I'm prepared to help you start over. A small design business back in Chicago. $50,000. Call it goodwill. Zora looked at him with genuine interest, the way you study a machine to see how it works. That's a generous number for a stranger's dream, she said. I'll pass. Everyone has a number, Miss Bennett. She stood and at the door she turned. You should hope not, Chairman. Breath. Thursdays in the lobby, where old Mr. Ko had started saving her chair. He had been the doorman for 41 years. He told her the clock was wound twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, and that his hands had done it for all 41. When the family treated her like staff, Mr. Ko treated her like the guest of honor. Once she asked him what the hotel needed most. New hearts upstairs, he said. Then he apologized for saying it, and she pretended she hadn't heard, and they understood each other completely. Humiliation. The Ilsong Foundation Gala in July, in the hotel's own grand ballroom. Madame Kwon handled the seating personally. Ju Hae-rin, the creditor's daughter, elegant, expensively bored, was placed at the head table beside Hyun-woo. Zora found a printed card waiting for her at the door, handed over by a staffer who couldn't meet her eyes. Vendor seating. Table 14. Management. The same word he wrote on her napkins, aimed back at her like a blade. She kept the card. She kept everything. The next morning a society column ran a photograph of the head table. Kwon heir and Ju heiress? A match made in the ballroom? Zora had been cropped out of the frame. Hyun-woo found her at table 14 that night and sat down among the vendors for the rest of the gala. Best table in the room, he said. The coffee people are here. He held her hand on the tablecloth where everyone could see it. Later, in the quiet, he said the thing she filed away like a contract. If they ever make you choose between me and your peace, tell me. I've been an asset my whole life, Zora. I won't stand there and watch them turn you into one. Breath. Sunday night calls with Dominique. You could end this circus with one wire, Dom said. The rule, Dom. Your rule is starting to cost you. Everything worth knowing costs. And through it all, she worked. Hyun-woo was vice president of operations now, fighting to save the hotel from the inside, and at night he brought his despair home to her kitchen table. She asked careful questions. Then one night, she quietly rebuilt his renovation and refinancing proposal from the stud's occupancy patterns, rate structure, the works, and slid it back across the table as just common sense. The board called it the best internal plan in a decade. His father killed it in one sentence. We don't need a consultant's fantasy. We need the Ju family. Where did you learn to read a P&L like that? Hyun-woo asked her that night, half joking, all admiration. I ran a small business once, Zora said. And I read a lot. The lie went down like a swallowed pin. It always did. What she didn't know yet was that someone in that family had stopped watching Hyun-woo and had found the photograph. Kwon Seok-min was the chairman's nephew, director of strategy, and the man who would inherit everything if Hyun-woo ever fell out of the line. He had been waiting for his cousin to make a mistake for 15 years. He had decided the American was it. The agency Seok-min hired was better than the first one. In August, it found the photograph. A tech meet, Chicago, 12 years old. A blurry name tag on a young woman's blazer. Zora Bennett. Stayline. Seok-min pulled the thread. Stayline. Hotel software, sold to a European giant. Price undisclosed. Founder. Zora Bennett. No interviews. No photographs. No history. He called the acquirer's press office in Amsterdam. They declined to comment on personnel matters. He hired a records firm in Chicago. 2 days later, the acquirer's counsel flagged the inquiry, as their agreements required, and a notification landed in the inbox of Odette Holdings. Dominique read it at 6 in the morning and called Seoul before her coffee finished brewing. Someone's digging in Chicago, Z. Close to the bone. For 3 weeks, Zora lived on a wire. Dominique's lawyers moved through third parties. A cease and desist here. A sealed record there. A quiet reminder to a records firm about the price of breaching a $1 billion NDA. The thread went dead in Seok-min's hands. Twice that month she almost told Hyun-woo everything. Once at midnight, watching him sleep, the whole confession lined up in her mouth. Once at breakfast, when he looked at her too long and asked, "Where do you go?" "When you stare at the clock like that." "Chicago," she said, which was true, and smiled, which was work. Seok-min was left with a dead thread and a live grudge. So he did what men like him do when the truth won't cooperate. He bought a lie that fit the shape of the whole. The dossier his agency assembled was 40 pages in gray. No employment history for 4 years. No assets. No tax filings beyond small design fees. A previous relationship with a wealthy man in Chicago ended abruptly. Conclusion, typed in the flat font of paid certainty. Subject displays the profile of a professional companion. Likely undisclosed debts. Motive, marriage settlement. Every fact was technically true. Every conclusion was exactly backwards. The emptiness her privacy had built was now the evidence against her. What she didn't know yet was which would arrive first, October or the gray folder with her name on it. September answered. A ratings agency downgraded the Ilsong Group's bonds on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, the Hong Kong consortium had invoked its covenants. The standstill now had one condition and one date: announce the Kwon Hyun marriage by mid-October, or repay everything at once. The board met on a Friday. The chairman ordered the match. Hyun-woo stood up in that boardroom, in front of directors twice his age, and said, "I'm engaged." "You are an employee of this family," his father said. "Engagements are terms. Terms change." And Seok-min slid the gray folder down the table. "Before you throw away the group for her," he said, "you should read what your fiancé actually is." Hyun-woo read 2 pages, closed it, and pushed it back. "You paid someone to write a novel," he said, and walked out. But the folder stayed in the room. And the room believed it because the room wanted to. The leak came 4 days later. A gossip site, then 2 more. Kwon Heir's American fiancé. No career, no family, no visible means. Questionable past. Sources close to the family concerned. Zora's phone buzzed all morning. 2 design clients canceled by lunchtime. The cafe owner whose walls she had painted took her photo down from his counter and couldn't look at her when she noticed. That night, Hyun-woo stood in her small studio with his tie loose and his voice shaking, and told her all of it. The covenant. The deadline. The ultimatum his father had given him at dinner, word for word. Marry Joo Hae-rin by October, or strangers will own your grandfather's hotel by Christmas. The girl or everything. "I need 2 weeks," he said. "There's a version of this where I save both. Let me find it." She looked at this good, exhausted man trying to hold up a house that was already sold, and she made her second decision. When he left, she sat with the ledger for an hour. Then she called Chicago. "Daw. Is the Ilsong paper still moving?" A pause on the line. "The consortium wants out by end of October. Controlled sale of the flagship. Quiet process, sealed bids. It would take most of what's liquid, plus leverage on top." Is this the heart or the head?" "Both," Zora said. "That's how I know it's right. And when the family finds out the buyer is you, they'll find out exactly when I decide they find out." Her conditions went into the first letter. The buyer would be a blind vehicle of Odette Holdings, identity sealed until signing. The hotel would keep its name. All 1,200 employees would keep their jobs. "Then we're in," Dominique said. God help them. What none of the Kwons knew yet, as they argued over wedding dates and covenants, was that the quiet fund their bankers were courting had a face, and that they had cropped it out of a photograph in July. The diligence took 3 weeks, and Zora walked it herself. She toured her own future hotel beside the consortium's bankers, wearing a visitor badge that said buyer's design consultant, which was, she reflected, the only honest job title anyone in that building had ever given her. She saw the books at last. The rot was worse than the corridors had told her. And in the renovation accounts she found something else, 900 million won. Drained over 3 years to a contractor that had no invoices, no office, and no work anyone could point to. Every authorization carried the same signature. Kwon Hyun-woo. She flagged it to her lawyer, attorney Sha Yun-mi, and said one word, later. On the second walkthrough, Madam Kwon Soon-hee passed the buyer's team in the lobby. She walked by without looking at a single face. Staff were furniture. Consultants were furniture with clipboards. She came within 4 feet of the woman who was buying her family's crown, and saw nothing at all. Mr. Ko saw her. Mr. Ko saw everything. He said only, "Your chair is free on Thursdays, miss," and opened the door. The bids went in on a Monday. There were 3. A property fund that would gut the hotel to condos. A chain that would strip the name off the front in a year. And Odette Holdings. Full price, the name stays. Every job stays. Thursday at noon, Dominique called. Accepted. 300 million. Signing is tomorrow, 9 a.m., at the bank. Congratulations, Z, you're about to own the Z. You there? I'm here, Zora said. That evening she stood alone on the hotel mezzanine with the ledger in her bag, looking down at the lobby, at the clock, at the worn path in the marble. One signature away. And the man she loved still didn't know her. That was the flaw in all of it, and she saw it clearly now. If she signed at 9, Hyun-woo would learn who she was from a deed, not from her. Tonight, she said quietly to nobody. To Odette, maybe. I tell him everything tonight. Her phone rang. An unknown number. A crisp secretary's voice. Miss Bennett. The chairman requests a private meeting this evening. The residence. 8 o'clock. Come alone. Zora looked down at the lobby for a long moment. Tell him I'll be there at 8. What the Kwon family did not know, as they set one check and one gray folder on the study table, was that the woman they had summoned had, 6 hours earlier, become the accepted buyer of everything they were about to threaten her with. The study smelled of old paper and cold tea. The chairman sat behind his desk. Madam Kwon sat by the window. Seok-min stood at the door, holding the gray folder like a verdict. They gave her the folder first. Read it, the chairman said. Then you'll understand our position. Zora read 3 pages, unhurried, while they watched her the way you watch a fuse. Page 2 is backwards, she said. The man in Chicago wasn't wealthy when I dated him. He got money later. It changed him. You'd have found that interesting, if accuracy mattered here. She turned one more page, then closed the folder and set it down. But this line is true. No assets. No filings. No history. 100 pages about me. And not one of you asked the only real question. Why is nothing in my name? Because there's nothing to put, Seok-min said. That's one theory, Zora said. The chairman opened the desk drawer. By Friday, he said, this family will have signed its crown over to strangers. Bankers, funds, people with no faces. I cannot stop that. But I will not hand this family a scandal on the same weekend. My son marries Ju Hae-rin this month. He laid the check on the desk and pushed it across with one finger. $100,000. It clears tonight. You are on a plane by Sunday. And you never contact my son again? From the window, Madam Kwon spoke gently, which was the cruelest register she had. It's kinder this way, dear. In this country, you would always be a story. Take the ending where you're paid. Take it, Seok-min said. It's more than women like you usually get. And Zora Bennett looked at the check, and picked it up, and folded it once, and put it in her purse. And she smiled. Thank you, she said. I'll put it to good use. At the door she stopped. One more thing, Chairman. Your bank. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Be there in person. Someone bought your hotel this week. You should look them in the eye when they sign. When the door had closed, Seok-min laughed and poured 3 drinks. Told you. They always take the check. Madam Kwon was still looking at the door. She did not pick up her glass. She didn't ask for more, she said slowly. They always ask for more. Nobody listened to her. Nobody ever listened to the one useful thing. They told Hyun-woo an hour later, in the chairman's study, with the checkbook still open on the desk. His father said it plainly. It's done, she took the money. Gold diggers always do. Seok-min showed him a photograph of Zora folding the check into her purse. Hyun-woo looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he took an envelope out of his jacket and set it on his father's desk next to the checkbook. My resignation, he said. I signed it at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Before dinner. Before your check existed. The shares go back to the family trust. All of it. You'd throw away your name for a woman who just sold you for $100,000? You don't know what she did, Hyun-woo said, picking up his coat. You know what you did. There's a difference. I'm going to go find out the rest. At 11 that night, Zora's buzzer rang. He stood in her doorway with a duffel bag. They told me you took the check, he said. I did. Okay. He set the bag down inside the door. Okay, she said. I resigned at 4. Before any check. I chose you at 4 o'clock, Zora. Whatever you did at 8 doesn't change 4 o'clock. He looked at her, tired and certain. You don't owe me an explanation tonight. She looked at him standing there, unemployed and disinherited, in the doorway of a rented studio, with everything he'd ever had zipped into one bag. He had passed a test he didn't even know he was taking. Sit down, Hyun-woo, she said. I owe you about 11 years of them. She put the ledger on the kitchen table first. She told him about the Marigold. 12 rooms in Bronzeville. The doors that were closed, and Odette's door that wasn't. A name written down as a person remembered. She told him about the front desk in the Loop, about the office over the laundromat, about Stayline. When it sold, she said, the price was $1.9 billion. I owned 38%. He didn't move. She told him about the man in Chicago, and the text message she was never meant to see. About the rule. Nobody new gets the number. She told him about Odette Holdings and Dominique, and 4 years of small design jobs that paid her rent, while her family office quietly bought pieces of hotels on 3 continents. And there's one more thing, Zora said. Tomorrow at 9 I'm signing. Odette Holdings is buying the Grand Ilsong. $300 million. The bid was accepted yesterday at noon. Before your father ever put that check on the table. Hyun-woo stood up. He walked to the window. He was quiet long enough for her to be afraid, for the first time all night. When he turned around, his eyes were wet, and he laughed once. At all of it. At the size of it. 2 years, he said. I confessed my name in month 2. You watched me do it. He shook his head slowly. The money, I don't care about the money, Zora. That's the part you never understood. Why not me? At first the rule, she said. Then something worse. I loved being your zero. You loved a woman with a sketchbook and no number. I have been the number to everyone else who ever found out. I wasn't ready to learn if you'd change. And now? You resigned at 4 o'clock, she said. Now I know. He sat back down across from her, and after a while he pulled the ledger closer and turned its pages carefully, reading the names, and she watched him understand exactly what she was buying tomorrow and why. One condition, he said finally. When it's yours, I'm not walking in as the owner's man. I'll apply. Interviews. References. Like anyone. Your last employer fired his own son, Zora said. References might be a problem. It was the first time either of them had laughed in a week. At dawn she stood across the street from the Grand Ilsong, alone, with the ledger in her bag, and watched Mr. Ko unlock the brass doors the way he had unlocked them for 41 years. And there, on the sidewalk, with no one watching, Zora Bennett finally cried. Not for the Kwons. Not for the check. For a woman she had never met, who ran 12 rooms with a piano in the parlor, who wrote down every name because every name deserved writing down. For her grandmother reading them out loud on Sunday afternoons. By 9, her eyes were dry. The signing room at the bank held a long table, the consortium's bankers on one side, and at the head of it, attorney Cha Eun-mi. Dominique Hayes, who had flown in overnight and hugged Zora hard enough to hurt, and Zora Bennett in a plain gray suit. At 9:02, Chairman Kwon Dae-sung walked in with Seok-min and 2 lawyers, ready to surrender his crown to a faceless fund. He saw her and stopped. What is this? He said. Remove her. This is a private, Chairman Kwon, the consortium's lead banker said, standing. May I introduce the principal of Odette Holdings, the accepted buyer. The room went very quiet. That's impossible, Seok-min said. She has no. And the words from his own dossier died in his mouth. Zora didn't stand. She nodded at the empty chairs and waited, and the Kwon sat down at a table she was the head of. Attorney Cha slid a single page across to the chairman. The escrow statement, for the seller's verification. You'll want to note the earnest money line. The chairman read it. The line was short. Earnest deposit minus 100,000 US dollars. Personal check no. 5,471. Account. Kwon Dae-sung. Your contribution to the purchase, Chairman, Zora said. I told you I'd put it to good use. He looked up at her, and she watched the whole night before rearrange itself behind his eyes. $300 million, she said, in the same calm voice she'd used in his study. That's the price of this hotel. The check you gave me last night is 1/30th of 1% of it. You didn't insult me, Chairman. You mispriced me. In your business, that's the only unforgivable sin. You deceived my son, he said, because it was all he had left. Your son resigned everything he owns for me before he knew a single zero existed, Zora said. You sold everything your father built rather than respect a stranger. One of you was deceived about this family. It wasn't him. She nodded to Attorney Cha, who slid a second folder down the table, thinner and gray, because Zora had a sense of humor about these things. Diligence finds everything, Zora said. 900 million won, 3 years, a contractor that doesn't exist, one signature on every page. That goes to your board this afternoon. What they do with it is family business. I don't buy people. I bought a building. Seok-min did not say one word. He had gone the color of the folder. Zora signed. It took 4 minutes. When it was done, the lead banker stood and said, Congratulations. The Grand Ilsong is yours. And Dominique squeezed her hand under the table so hard the pen shook. The press release went out at noon. Grand Ilsong Seoul acquired by Odette Holdings. All staff retained. The name stays. By evening, the wire services had the rest, because the rest was too good to stay buried. The principal of Odette Holdings was the founder of Stayline, the billion-dollar software company whose founder had never given an interview. The one blurry photograph ran on every screen in the country. The gossip site that had called her a woman with no visible means quietly deleted its article, which everyone had already screenshotted. And the society column that had cropped her out of the gala photo ran a new headline over the same picture. Uncropped this time. The fiancé the Kwons ignored could have bought them twice. Madame Kwon Soon-hee was hosting a luncheon when the alert reached every phone at the table at once. 11 screens lit up. 11 faces turned to her. She reached for her tea, and her hand was not steady enough to lift it. At 3 that afternoon, Zora walked through the brass doors of her hotel. The staff had gathered in the lobby, 1,200 jobs holding their breath in 200 faces. Mr. Ko bowed. She stopped him with a hand on his arm. Mr. Ko, 41 years. The clock still winds Mondays and Thursdays? Mondays and Thursdays, ma'am. Keep it that way. That's my first order as owner. Nothing happens to that clock without your permission. She turned to the lobby. The name on this building stays. Your jobs stay. What's broken behind the walls, we fix together. That's all. Back to work. We have guests. The lobby did not go back to work. The lobby applauded, and old Mr. Ko wiped his eyes with a white glove and pretended it was the cold from the door. The consequences arrived one by one, each with the right name on it. Seok-min fell first. The board audit confirmed every page of the thin gray folder. He repaid what he could, resigned what he couldn't keep, and his name came quietly off the group register. The man who had commissioned a dossier of lies had authored, in his own signature, the only file that mattered. The Jew family withdrew from everything within a week. The marriage, the standstill, the friendship, and publicly blamed Madame Kwon Soon-hee's matchmaking for the humiliation. Her charity boards found reasons to meet without her. In November, she sent Zora a handwritten invitation to lunch, to clear the air. Zora sent back one line. Table 14 is available. Ju Hae-rin, for her part, sent flowers to the hotel with a card that made Zora laugh out loud. You saved us both. She meant it. They have tea now, twice a year, and neither of them has ever once discussed a man. Chairman Kwon Dae-sung lasted a month. The board that had watched him lose the flagship, the marriage alliance, And his own son in a single week voted him into retirement with all the ceremony of a closing door. He came to the hotel in December alone and asked at the front desk, like anyone, whether Miss Bennett would see him. She received him in the lobby, standing under the clock. "I was protecting this family," he said. "I want you to know that." "No, Chairman. You were protecting the name." She kept her voice level because she had never needed it to be anything else. "I'm the one protecting what your father actually built." Starting with the people inside it, he waited for her to say it was all right. She didn't say it was all right. He had booked a room because his own apartment had become a place where phones rang. So the man who once owned the Grand Ilsong slept in it that night as a paying guest under her roof and was treated on her explicit standing instruction with perfect, unfailing courtesy. Some kinds of karma don't need to raise their voice. And Hyun-woo applied. 3 interviews. A panel that included Dominique Hayes, who grilled him for 2 hours about labor practices and loyalty and one specific July gala, and who told Zora afterward, grudgingly, he'll do. He was hired as director of operations, not general manager, because he hadn't earned that yet, and nobody wanted it that way more than he did. His first week, a coffee appeared at his desk with a napkin under it. Dinner at 8. The management. They were married in the spring, on a Thursday, in the lobby, under the clock, which Mr. Ko had insisted on winding that same morning with his own hands. Dominique stood beside Zora. The staff filled the mezzanine. Nobody sat at a head table, because Zora had the tables removed entirely. In her hotel, there were no vendor seats. The renovation finished that summer. The chandelier was rewired properly at last. The marble path stayed worn on the owner's orders. And off the lobby, where a gift shop used to be, a small bar opened with photographs of a Bronzeville guesthouse on its walls, and a name in brass on its door. The Marigold. In a glass case by its entrance sits a leather ledger, open to a page from 1952, and beside it a new book, where any guest may sign. The plaque above it says what Odette always said. A name written down is a person remembered. People ask Zora sometimes, the young staff she trains, the women who write to her from 3 continents, how she sat in that study, holding a check meant to erase her, and smiled. She always tells them the same thing. The people who ask what you cost are telling you what they're worth. She never hid who she was. She hid what she had, because what you have teaches people what to want from you, and who you are teaches them nothing they can spend. The family found out her net worth the morning after they showed her theirs. If Zora's story reminded you of your own quiet worth, of a room that priced you low and lived to see the invoice, then this is where that story gets to matter. Subscribe if this channel has earned a place in your feed, and stay close, because there are more women like Zora whose stories deserve to be told. And tell me this honestly. If you were Zora in that study, holding a $100,000 check from people who wanted you gone, would you have taken it and made it the first deposit on their own hotel like she did? Or would you have torn it up on the table and walked out with nothing of theirs in your hands? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you land and why. Thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next story.